Hello and welcome to Bunto's free link provided and friendly God haters hangout. I wish there was a God. I'm here with my friends Jeff Keller, Lindsay Liu, Michael N, and Tim. And our subject to just kick off this one will be nutrition. What do we know about nutrition? I was in a hangout lately where, what did you say? Denial is a river in Africa or whatever they say.
Yeah,
Denial is
deny.
a big river. And they were trying to spin, how would you say, Michael Ann, that like drinking the amount of Mountain Dew and chocolate Cheerios you eat, it just
Wow.
depends on the amount you eat. It's healthy.
And as a diabetic.
And as a diabetic, so go ahead. Could you please nutshell that for us, Michael Ann? What is totally wrong with this sort of? Oh, I can be a diabetic and eat Choco Cheerios and drink Mountain Dew.
Cheesecake.
Well, it's her concepts of how to get phosphorus into her, which is an absurd concept. How many people walk around wondering about their phosphorus,
True.
even as a diabetic? I mean, that shit takes place in the kidney. She has no governance over that, and a box of Cheerios certainly isn't going to influence it. But when you're sitting talking rocket science to people that don't know rocket science, you could say just about anything.
Okay,
So,
just for people. Okay, what is phosphorus good for in the body? Just off the top of the head. Oh, please, Michael, could you give your bona fides for this? That you're a nurse.
Well, I'm a registered nurse, 30 years private practice in intravenous nutrition, meaning I get nutrition at the cellular level, which is something you can't attain by mouth.
Thank you.
Nutrition is something that is required if you want to be able to heal, and it's the most misunderstood, little-known weapon in every person's wellness program. Can't tell you how many people walk in the door tell me they're the cleanest vegetarian on the planet, everything they do is right, and here they are, stage 4 cancer sitting in front of me. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me know how that happened. So in the case of our friend Nadia, trying to help her and then seeing that she really doesn't want to be helped. She has absolutely no interest in helping herself, which is why she sits there and slugs back 6 liters of diet soda,
Right, Michael.
thinking that that's the way to go.
No, she didn't necessarily say I don't want help. She gave some sort of, what would you say, rationale for some sort of denial that made no sense whatsoever.
She might as well have just sat there and said, "I don't want your help."
Right, but just so we explain to our audience.
She just languaged it as if it were something required for her in order to help maintain her health.
Right. Okay, that's a good point.
Of all the things on the planet, you're going to choose chocolate Cheerios and some Mountain Dew. Okay.
All right.
Then not only just those 2 choices, but when you observe her, and I got to observe her in as many hours as I possibly could straight in a row. And that's all you would see. Soda and Cheerios. Well, that's how a 3-year-old would conduct their life.
Right, Michael. Okay, Michael, let me get to the point here. Okay, why do people do this? Why do people delude themselves about the way they are taking care of their bodies?
I have no idea. And this is why I do it intravenously, because patient compliance sucks. And I got tired of telling people what to do, and they wouldn't do it, so I took matters into my own hand. When I drop my infusions, I can change everything from the eyebrows on down. I don't care what's wrong with you. I can heal a wound. I can grow bone. I can get people to sleep, poop on demand, and have more energy than 2 parents can handle. Restore, repair, remove. It's
now let's say that. Let's pretend that Nadia is actually listening to this hangout, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's tell our audience. I mean, right off the bat, what's phosphorus good for? I mean, why do you need phosphorus?
Well, for a number of things. Bones need bone. It's an ingredient for bones. It's also an ingredient to be able to move electricity. You have to have magnesium and phosphorus, sodium and potassium. I mean, there's certain physiological responses that requires that.
To claim getting it out of Cheerios, I mean, that's
exactly. It's like saying I got all the vitamin C I want because they fortified the cereal. I mean, you'd have to be retarded.
Well, what doesn't it maintain a balance between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell, the water and electrolyte balance? That's why you need those kind of things, right? I mean, that's my understanding of it.
Well, cell movement is dictated on concentration.
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't eat enough to get cellular shift, as what we call.
Okay.
That's why you do things intravenously. Healing and killing is done internal to the cell. You can't get there by mouth.
Right.
Okay, so sometimes you need to heal and kill internal to the cell.
Okay.
So when you take things by mouth, the kidney governs what goes and what stays. When you give something intravenously, the kidney has no say. If I drop 100 grams of vitamin C, you're going to get 100 grams of vitamin C, and the kidney's not going to spit a thing. Now, you take 6,000 milligrams of vitamin C by mouth in a non-lipospheric method, because that uses nanotechnology for intracellular penetration, then you're not going to get to where you need to be. And then the kidney's going to say, oh, you only needed 6,000 today. You just took 6,000. You had 4 in reserve. We're going to spit some out. And she does the equilibration. When I do it intravenously, there's no conversation with the kidney. She has no say.
Right. So there is a certain.
There are three librarians that sit in the body. One sits in the stomach. One sits in the bloodstream. One sits at the blood-brain barrier. The one in the stomach could care less what you send down. Her job is to pulverize it and hand it over to the bloodstream. The bloodstream's job is much more discerning. She has to have everything running through all the blood-rich organs in a non-aggressive, offensive manner. So that means you need to be on the list, or you don't get in. So if you're drinking something with aspartame, vitamin C or whatever the aspartame came in will pass, but she's going to put a hold stop on that aspartame. You can't have aspartame in the bloodstream. It's a poison. And so there needs to be spit into the tissues in self-preservation. The body automatically does this. And so therefore, this is where chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia comes from.
Okay, just a sec, Michael. Okay, I totally agree with you and your doctor's view. Okay, I'm just going to bring it 5 centimeters off the ground, all right? Let's say I'm married to Nadia, okay? And I'm really worried, all right? I mean, I'm really worried about her health and where it's going.
Here's the deal, Bunto.
She
drives her own bus. I wouldn't care if you were married to her. You got no say in what she does. There are 2 positions in life. You drive the bus or you ride in it. That's her bus.
Well,
She's the driver.
You
don't
her.
honestly think you got no shot. You got no shot. Nope. Not
even
with
if I drag her screaming and crying to the doctor.
Not with a mindset like hers. She's already done the math. She's going to die. I mean, just the name of her latest hangout. Just the name of it. I mean, she really does think she's the shit.
Okay. Jeff, are you there?
She needs to get over herself.
Yes, I'm here.
Jeff, how do I deal with my wife Nadia, who's just on her highway to hell? How do you deal with people like that who just are so destructive?
I don't know.
I let them go.
I mean, is that right? Did I just throw my hands up, Jeff? Is that what I do?
You got to stand and watch the baby cross the street. You just got to watch it.
Well, it's generally tough to change people. You know, the old cliche, they have to want to change.
Especially if they think they have all the answers.
Any tips, Jeff, to how do I intervene in her life to make it better?
Well,
I don't know. I suppose each person is different, but by and large, most people.
It's her job.
Most people dig
to make
in when
herself
you
happy.
Try to.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. Let me hear.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I have no idea. Everybody's different, and probably a lot of people would dig in and resist. You know, people try to get others to quit drinking all the time or do other things that they regard as self-destructive. So I have no clue. I'd be very wealthy if I did know.
So it is like alcoholism, right? I'm dealing with a substance abuser.
Perhaps. I don't know if it's a physical addiction or whatever, but just in the sense that people generally are resistant to change their ways when other people just, if they don't feel like doing it. I agree with the other guest that
what do you think, Tim?
It's really hard to do.
Is it substance abuse when you just eat Cheerios and drink Mountain Dew when you're a diabetic?
Yeah. Well, it's destructive to your body. I don't understand why somebody would do that if they cared about their health. I mean, like, you know, I previously had a problem with alcohol, and Still do to some extent. It's like, I do these things, to self-medicate, but in the end, all it ends up doing is destroying my health and destroying my mental health, which already is pretty bad, and basically destroying my life. It's the same idea if you are abusing. If you have a mental health problem and you're self-medicating with alcohol, it's the same thing as having diabetes and self-medicating with sugar and stuff because you want it so bad, right? So I don't know.
Well, here's my deal. I tell people all the time, I don't study disease. I'm a body mechanic. Okay, and you wouldn't take your car to an auto mechanic and say, you know what, I got a little rust here. What do you think we throw some milk down the gas tank and see if that won't help? Okay, you got to run it the way it was designed to run, with exactly what it was designed to run with. Now, if people don't think nutrition is a worthwhile obligation, stop eating and tell me how you do in about a week. Give me a call.
All right. Okay. If let's say she was a substance abuser, wouldn't I have a case for getting her committed? Wouldn't I have a case?
She's got 1,000 things you could commit her for. Nutrition is the least of what you could get her committed for.
What do you think, Jeff? Is that drastic to have somebody committed just because you care so much about her health?
I think it's a violation of their sovereignty too. They own their own life.
What do you care? That's her deal.
Well, I'm her husband.
No, it doesn't matter what
it doesn't matter. You don't own her. The land.
No, you don't. Exactly.
The line forms
really?
in the rear.
I just let her die in front of me.
There it is. You're going to watch it. I don't care who you're married to, unless they hand over their power to you.
Die in front of me.
There it is. What are you going to do?
Well, you're asking.
If you don't have her cooperation, what are you going to do? Throw a hose down her nose, like they do at Guantanamo, and feed her?
What do you think? Well, she eventually is going to kill herself.
Well, that's what she intends to do. That's her mission.
That's
See, the rest of us were thinking that she was sick and needed help. Well, when you go to help her, she doesn't want to help herself.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
The opposite of having somebody committed is not, I don't care, I'm not going to do or say anything. But you don't get to, you don't commit somebody if they're just, that it's their body and that they ultimately can decide. Mm-hmm. And it's also a gray area. We all do things that are unhealthy, so it's a matter of degree, really. It's not. I mean, we consider this an extreme degree, but we all do things that occasionally that are against our long-term health.
Okay, Jeff. Just to ask you, could you think of a case where you would actually get somebody committed, do something against their will? Any case?
You'd have to be schizophrenic or something. They'd have to be out of their mind.
Let me ask you.
Or you take a very extreme anorexic and they're down to like 75 pounds, yes, and if you lose 2 more pounds, maybe that.
What do you think, Jeff? Is there any case where you would have somebody committed?
Like committed to a mental institution?
Any way to save their life, anything to save their life. Is there any case where you would have somebody committed?
There might be, but I would not consider. I would accept that there may be consequences, and I would accept that I do not have a legal right to do that. But there may be personally cases where if I cared something, I would force somebody from, not walking out into the traffic, something that somebody would likely thank me for later, stuff like that. But
that is a yes, you're saying, Jeff?
I would say that I might, if it was somebody
like suicide,
close enough to me, like a suicide. Yeah. I might intervene in that case. But I would accept the consequences for having done so if the person really wanted to kill themselves and I used force to stop them. I think they would have a justified complaint against me, legally justifiable.
Now, just to ask you, Jeff, is it abhorrent in your libertarian thinking to actually intervene in somebody's prerogative like that?
I think I just answered that.
So I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah. You cannot legally, if somebody owns themselves and they have a right. If you own yourself and you're not a slave to somebody else, you have the right to live how you want to, ingest whatever you want to do anything that you want to, as long as you don't use force or fraud against somebody else.
Is there an age of accountability, like an age that they could come up to? I mean, like my 12-year-old kid is shooting heroin. Can I step in?
Right, you can make an
argument. Well, obviously, you're in charge till he's 18.
Right, but no, but you can make an argument that somebody is not a fully formed. They own themselves, but we have a thing called
An
where
adult.
we recognize that people do not reach the ability to consent right away. So
Age of consent.
contracts, like you can't sell a car to a 5-year-old because
They don't understand.
they wouldn't
Right.
know what the contract was all about. So we do recognize that people can be incapacitated and not be able to consent to things, just as older people can be mentally handicapped or whatever, and in some cases you could say that that person really couldn't have consented to what you claim it is. That's obviously gray area stuff. But just in general, if somebody, you don't have the right, if somebody's an adult and they don't want to go with the program when it comes to their diabetes or whatever it is, or they want to commit suicide, in my
Okay.
view, that's their right to do so.
All
But it
right.
doesn't. But I
There's
would.
also a
But I.
psychological aspect to diabetics. A lot of diabetics are not compliant. It's like they're pushback.
Okay, go ahead, Michael. Give us your view, please.
Well, I was just going to say that you have to know that there's a personality type that comes with chronic, long-term, and life-threatening illness, and especially with diabetes, they carry a little resentment, and this is why you'll see them. They'll eat ice cream and just say, "Fuck it, I'll just cover myself with insulin," not understanding that it's not that you want them to go through life not having the things that they'd like to have, but there are consequences for having sugar, like having a heart attack at the age of 50, not living beyond 65.
Right.
I mean, you have to understand there's a consequence to eating those Cheerios.
Very good, Michael. Tim, your take on intervening on people's prerogative, stepping on people's prerogative in order to help their lives.
Let me read you something, and this is from my profile on Google Plus. And podcasters. And this is something I honestly believe in. Hold on a second. Let it load. It's being slow. Have you guys ever heard of John Stuart Mill?
Yes.
Yes, the utilitarian philosopher.
Yes. If this shit will load. It's probably taking so long because I'm in a Hangout. Anyway, continue the conversation while this loads. I'll let
Okay,
you know.
Jeff, do you want to vamp on any more? Like, I was thinking, let me give you this situation, Jeff. You intervened on your wife's behalf. You completely save her life, and 2 years later, she thanks you for taking the needle out of her arm and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You did the wrong thing. That's what you're telling me by
No.
intervening.
No, I'm not saying that, and that's a very fine point. So, here's the deal. So, if my wife wants to commit suicide, legally, in a libertarian society, in my view, I can't force her not to. However, I may, as a human being, decide to do that anyway. And hopefully, in a year's time or 2 years' time, she will thank me for it and she will not press charges, because in libertarianism, crimes are crimes against other people. So if you have no victim, you have no crime. So hopefully she would say after 2 years' time that she was really glad that I did that, or maybe even less. But if she didn't, she would have the right in a libertarian society to prevent me from forcing her to dispose of her life or to do anything with her life, including disposing of it. So that's the distinction. It's two different issues about what I may or may not choose to do. I may decide that that it justifies the risk, that she may not be grateful and she may want to put me in jail or whatever an appropriate punishment would be. But that's the distinction. The distinction in libertarianism is that you own yourself, your own life. And that includes, when you own something, you have the right to dispose of it or destroy it if you choose to. And that includes your life.
Your take, Tim? Or he went, Tim went, he's looking for that thing that he was looking for. Oh, Michael Ann. Okay. Well, I mean, have we nutshelled it? Or do you think there's anything more to add?
No, I think we pretty much nutshelled it.
Okay.
All right. I found it.
All right, Tim.
It says it's in my profile because this is, like he was saying, I believe in a libertarian society. Although I'm a little L libertarian, I don't buy into some of their crap. But it says here, the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. He cannot rightfully be compelled to do or to forbear because it will be better for him to do so, because it will make him happier, because in the opinions of others to do so would be wise or even right. These are good reasons for remonstrating with him, or reasoning with him, or persuading him, or entreating him, but not for compelling him, or visiting him with any evil in case he do otherwise. To justify that, the conduct which it is desired to deter him from must be calculated to produce evil to someone else. The only part of the conduct for which anyone for which he is amenable to society is that which concerns others, and the part which merely concerns himself, his independence, is of right absolute. Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. And that's
So
my
think,
part.
what do you think, Jeff? Makes sense?
Yes, absolutely.
No,
I think
Michael,
we're on the same page here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's suppose I go ahead and take the libertarian viewpoint. Me and Nadia, I'm not going to touch her freaking drug use at all, right? I'm just going to let her bury herself, right?
Well, here's
and then
my
I'm
thing.
her husband. No, go ahead and explain this story, Michael. Okay, so I'm her husband, right? And then she tells me that she's shooting up with AIDS people, right? HIV people. So eventually, you know, the AIDS is going to interfere with my life, right? I'm going to catch AIDS from my wife because I don't intervene on her prerogative. Does that make sense to you libertarians?
Well, if she was,
I don't know why you have waited so long. I'd have kicked her ass to the curb long before that.
So I abandoned my wife, who I love.
I don't know. You know what being a husband
That's
means. You have to be
libertarian
the
thing. Abandon.
I think you could make a case as if she infected you with AIDS. You didn't know this was going on.
Oh, I did know what was going on. She told me, "Hey, I'm shooting up with the other guys."
Well, then you give her the ultimatum. You either stop or I have to leave you. That's one of the 3 A's that gets you out of a marriage without a hitch.
Oh, so I can abandon the one I love.
Adultery. Well, she's going to kill you.
Oh yeah, because I have to abandon the one I love because I have to keep the libertarian
It's not about
viewpoint
who you
of
love,
never stepping
Bunto.
out
It's
of
about who loves you.
No,
and if she loves
I just want to show you how it
she
makes
wouldn't be
no
sleeping
sense
with you.
All
whatsoever.
right, everyone,
Oh,
take a deep breath. Everyone, take a deep
ridiculous
breath.
question.
Yeah, this.
Well, let's
one
let
I
Jeff
love.
Jeff, go ahead and finish.
The one I love. Oh, boy.
Go ahead,
okay.
Jeff. Finish.
Is there a song
Okay.
that comes with that?
Mike Lamb, please. Jeff, go ahead.
Well,
Jesus Christ.
you're conflating different issues here, obviously.
Oh.
Yeah, you're saying, should she do this? Would this be a good marriage? Would this not be a tragedy? Yes, it would be terrible if your marriage went into that direction, I would think, for your sake. But you do not have the right to keep her in the marriage, or she is a sovereign, and if she's doing things that negatively impact your marriage, then that's grounds to dissolve the marriage, and that's tragic. People grow apart. That would be an extreme case, it would seem to me, but that's what happens. You do not own the person you're married to, so you would have no legal grounds to
Well, it's not
confine her in
legal,
any
Jeff.
way.
It's love. I love my wife. I want her to quit being a substance abuser and shooting up with people who have HIV.
Yeah.
And even my own personal stake comes in because eventually I'm going to get HIV from her if she continues her activity.
Now you're changing the subject. I asked you
that's
that
what I was
first
trying
of
to.
all.
I was trying to present that, Jeff.
Well,
except people were interrupting.
If you know that she's having sex with the people who are infected or who might be infected, and you continue to do that, then I think that is on you.
Okay, but you see what I mean? We read that John Stuart Mill thing, and I asked you if you all agreed with it, right? You know, say if it doesn't affect your own personal prerogative, then you have no say over the other person, right? Well, in this case, it does. She's my wife. She's shooting up with other people that have HIV. Eventually, she's going to catch it and then give it to me.
Okay, now
Doesn't it affect my prerogative?
If you're not safe,
I'm quite
Bunto.
sure that you're describing something that would be occurring over a period of time. You're not describing a solo incident where you walked in the door and all of a sudden all of this information came to you and you had to decide, do I save my wife in my marriage? Do I scoop her up and take her to somewhere? Well, you're going to get 72 hours. And when she wakes up out of her coma and says, I'm out of here, okay, and comes home to you, then you have to make the decision. Do I want to beat my head against the wall? Because it's obvious she's not going to stop, or she would have stayed there. And if she loved me, she would understand. So you need to love yourself before you love another to the point where you would risk your own life. You need to take the hike. It's simple. Let her do what she's going to do. She has no love for you. You don't cry over anything that wouldn't cry over you.
So you're saying that
You have the right to use persuasion, but you do not have the right to use force or violence to get your woman, no matter how much you love her, to behave in the way that you think she should.
So you're telling me, Michael, and that commitment doesn't work. I go have her committed. That ain't going to work.
You got 72 hours without her consent. Okay? When she wakes up and says, what am I doing here? Oh, your husband loves you, honey.
No,
Like
what the
stop
libertarian
doing the
got
heroin.
upset about was me having her committed. See what I mean?
No, I wouldn't be upset about that.
Jeff, wasn't the libertarian upset that I had her committed? Didn't I violate the rule of the libertarian society by stepping on a prerogative?
Having somebody committed is using force or violence against them if they're not
But,
hurting
you
somebody
couched
else.
it like you were her husband. Like
Right.
she was a part of you. I mean,
Yeah,
you're not
You're
talking
loading this
about
with your personal feelings and I'm
Yeah.
in love and
No, let
all
me
this, and, oh,
let me
you're
go
so
ahead and
mean.
present.
No,
Let
we're
me
just
present.
Let
the
me ask you a question.
hypothetical.
Do you think you have any right to walk into your brother's home and say, brother, you drink too much. I want your ass to go right now to rehab? I mean, interventions happen every day with family members who try to do this. Okay, and you got 72 hours unless the person agrees to go.
right, and they
So
do.
you're only talking about 72 hours to get her to stop the immediate use of the
I'm
heroin
not
and
worried
hope
about
to
the
God she
mechanics,
wakes up.
Michael, and I am not worried about the legalese or the mechanics. I'm just showing you the, what'd you say, idyllic
I personally,
understanding that libertarians have about this subject.
unless
Libertarians do
somebody
not
was
have
in
an
depression.
idyllic resolution for everything. Your love, your marriage can go sour. People can be self-destructive. Libertarianism is simply a legal framework that recognizes
Right.
the sovereignty of an individual.
May we call it a
ultimately.
philosophy in this case?
Well,
It's a political philosophy, yes.
Okay.
I
I'm
mean,
just demonstrating that any sort of stepping on a person's prerogative, as far as like committing them, is aberrant to the libertarian philosophy. That's what I'm showing.
Here's the thing. Okay, if somebody is a danger to others, that is sort of a sticky issue when it comes to libertarianism, because they may not be consciously causing harm to others, or willingly doing it, because they may be very mentally ill. But that's the thing. You have to determine that the person is not capable of making their own choices and is a danger to others. Now, in that case, I'm kind of on the fence. I think it needs to be a pretty extreme situation that you can commit somebody. I don't know. What really, I mean, what's your take on that, Jeff?
Well, I think that there is sort of the clear and present danger rule, and that's obviously something that has some gray area to it. But Bunto has sort of changed this example around a little bit. So first it was about he already knew about it, and now it's about, well, what if he didn't know it? And she was knowingly, and I think knowingly has a lot to do with it, means, motive, and opportunity. If she was knowingly having really high-risk sex and putting her husband in danger and actually having sex with him and not telling him about this, then I would think that could be grounds for that could be a case where she's putting him in harm's way, and
Adultery,
and that could.
addiction, and abuse, you get a free walk. Now, you want to stick around for the aftermath of that explosion, knock yourself out. But you're better to walk off and come back. If they've saved themselves, they save themselves. But you are not obligated for an abuse or addiction or adultery.
Now, Michael Ann, did I say I wanted to abandon the relationship at any point?
Okay.
No, but here's the deal.
Then why bring it up then, honey? I'm not talking about that.
Because you can't force somebody. You can't force somebody to change their life just because you're their husband.
The solution is not abandonment. The solution is intervening on the prerogative. That is the solution.
I disagree, Bunto.
I know. Give it a whirl. How many alcoholics have you tried to convert?
How many interventions have they had today, even? I mean,
Seriously.
that's why they have intervention guys and commitments, is because other people care about their loved ones and do
Sure.
not want to see them cause harm to themselves or anybody else.
Okay, but some people have to join the table, okay? And if they don't want to come to the table after repeated responses, you need to
Sure.
cut the cord.
And I would just like to add, if
But
you
to have somebody,
hold on,
put into a mental institution, you only got 48 to 72 hours, and then they're out. It's got to be voluntary.
so
Why would you put them in there?
for the sake of clarity, either we're having a conversation about whether or not somebody should be in a relationship or not, no matter how dysfunctional it is, or whether one or not should urge somebody to. The only time libertarianism comes into it is whether or not force is allowed, or violence, or the threat thereof. So it's not. Libertarianism has nothing to say about who you should be in a relationship with, or should you leave with your heart broken, or all of those things. Those are all very human issues, but they're not something that a political philosophy has anything to say about, a proper one anyway.
Okay, very good. Jeff, there is such thing in libertarian philosophy as a polite intervention. Like a very low force or no force stepping on someone else's prerogative. Say a passive aggressive.
Can you? Okay.
Like, I'm trying to think about
following you.
Like I cut her purse strings, like everything pretty much to coerce this person without force into commitment. I could do that in a libertarian philosophy.
Well, you'd be responsible for replacing her purse. You're not libertarians. If it's her property, you've destroyed her property or damaged it. So you don't have that right under libertarianism. No.
So I couldn't legalese out a polite intervention.
You're a polite intervention. No, persuasion is perfectly fine. Destroying somebody's person or property or using force or violence against them is wrong in a libertarian society.
So my hands are really handcuffed.
If you want to use force or fraud or violence, yes.
The ultimate issue is that people want to exert control over others, but in a libertarian society, that's simply not allowed. It's a hard thing to. Like I said, it's a sticky issue, but ultimately it comes down to the fact that you're just going to have to accept that people are in control of their lives, and you may love them, and you may care about them, but they're going to make choices, and those choices are on their own, and you can't. You're going to have to live with that. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
And do we do this for people who are smoking or people who are having too much cholesterol or
the degree matters?
I know. Where does it stop? I mean, we're forcing people to wear seatbelts.
Right.
Where does it stop? Where does it end? Do we close down all the McDonald's?
Either you own yourself or somebody else owns you. And if somebody else owns you, you're a slave, even if they may think they know better for you than you do.
Yeah.
So we can get rid of seatbelts and
get rid of them. We shouldn't force people to wear them.
Right. That's.
Here's the deal. Democrats love all laws as long as they're mandatory. It's the mandatory part that's got to go.
Yeah.
You can write any law you care to, but the mandatory part, that's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a big area between mandatory and prohibited. So you sell seatbelts to people who want cars with seatbelts, and you don't. Now, insurance companies, they have an interest in your being safe, and they may not. They may charge you more if your car doesn't have insurance. So there's other incentives, but no, not wearing seatbelts is a victimless crime, and thus it should not be a crime. It's a non-crime in a libertarian world.
Just like smoking weed.
Like smoking weed.
And I live in Colorado, and thank God we came to our senses and made it legal.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we get rid of all our safety laws and leave it up to private industry incentives to enforce the, what would you say?
No.
The daredevils of our society, right, Jeff? To police them.
Well, people typically, unfortunately, the people who have a death wish are few and far between.
Thank
But
God.
yes, we have an interest in safety. People were clamoring for safety actually before seatbelts were made required. People wanted safe cars, and since something I know a little bit about the car business, in the 1960s, there was a stigma against muscle cars, and muscle cars had to be smuggled into other lines. Like the GTO was actually a Le Mans option package and stuff like that.
Oops, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that great, but I was.
Yeah, really.
I was just like, thank God, you said the best thing ever. No.
But anyway, so people have an interest in safety, and there's an economic interest in safety. People who own businesses, who own restaurants, don't make money if they poison their customers, and Walmart
Right.
doesn't make money if they sell you something that's going to electrocute you, and that's why they get things from like the Underwriters Lab. It's a private safety organization. There's no government involved. Everything electronic that a major department store or a minor department store would sell will have the UL label on it. So there's all kinds of mechanisms that.
Private. Okay,
yeah.
Can we all agree that we hate the nanny society?
Absolutely.
I can. I don't know about you.
Okay.
Based
And
on
the opposite of
previous
the
line of questioning.
and the opposite of the nanny society is a completely unregulated libertarian one, right?
Well,
Unrelated.
the nanny state, strictly speaking, a libertarian. I would say we're talking about enforcement. We're not talking about do people not care? Are there not forces that would spontaneously give people safety or
Spontaneously.
spontaneously? So, yeah, the opposite of a nanny state. Nanny's is kind of not a precise term, but you could say is a non-paternalistic libertarian state that protects or maternalistic, however you want to characterize it.
Okay, so I don't know why these people came up with all these safety regulations. It must be some sort of, I don't know, giveaway to the industry, to the seatbelt industry, right? Giveaway to the fire extinguisher prevention agency. These are just like giveaways, right? In the libertarian mind.
Well, there
are
is
safety mechanisms.
No, I think there's different forces involved. For the most part, for some part, I do think there are advocacy groups, people who think that these are the way to go. There are unintended consequences, even if you do think they're the way to go. They tend to make cars more expensive, and when you make more cars expensive at the margins, fewer people can buy new cars, and they actually drive older cars that just aren't as safe because of their age, not so much of how they're equipped. But so there are unintended consequences. But there is a very real phenomenon called regulatory capture, where you do find that a lot of these safety things were actually lobbied for by the manufacturers, and they weren't doing that because they had to be forced to put those things in, but they want to make it harder for startup companies to get into the game. So they do spec out these regs to favor very large and firm entrenched interests. This is called regulatory capture. It's a very known phenomenon, and it's also a known phenomenon that whenever there's a hue and cry to regulate the industry, where do you think they get these Solomon-like regulators? They get them from the actual industry itself. So the industry itself becomes its regulator, and that helps ensure that the regulations favor the large players, the ones that can afford all the action and get what they want. But
well, and you know, there's a huge difference between the insurance. This is going back to an earlier point, between an insurance company hiking up the cost of your insurance because you choose not to wear a seatbelt, and you getting legal consequences like a ticket or a day in jail for not wearing your seatbelt. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
And on one hand, the insurance company can choose to do what they want. They're not a governmental agency. You know, they don't have the right to lock you up and restrict your rights, whereas the government does. And so you know, in a libertarian society, it would be acceptable for an insurance company to hike up their prices because you don't wear your seatbelt.
Right. It's a simple. Nobody's obligated to give you insurance.
Right.
You're
Nobody.
You're not obligated to pay anybody in particular to have insurance. The insurance companies, you know, it's a contractual arrangement. You do this, and we'll do that. If one party defaults, then it's just null and void. So that's all. But yeah, you're right. If and there's no aggressor. Contrast with somebody locking you up and putting you in jail in a government rape room because you haven't used your seatbelt. They're the aggressor in that situation.
Yeah, there was no contract between you and the government. The moment you were born, you were under their jurisdiction. I mean, and there's that nonsense free man on the land crap, but it's nonsense. The reality is there is
no contract. There's no social contract. A contract means something. It means that two parties have knowingly consented to something, and no,
right.
there's no. You have not. You know, if you're buying a cell phone, a contract is like this long, and it's a couple pages. That's what a contract is. A contract that has to do with your life and who gets to kidnap you and who gets to take your stuff would have to be many more.
1 second. In America.
You
froze up.
We lost you, Albert.
Oh, the sound's not working?
No, there we go. There we go. Okay.
You froze up.
Is the sound working?
You said in America, and that was the last thing we heard.
Oh, okay. So in America, of course, it would not be a social contract because you get your citizenship with birth. But in other countries, you still have to get citizenship even if you were born there. So in a way, you do kind of make an agreement with the country you live in.
No, I'm afraid not, and it doesn't matter what. When you talk about basic human rights, you're not really talking about geographic areas or lines on maps.
Oh,
it's about what is it?
What's the main topic?
We're talking in general about. We were talking. It was in the context of health, but we've kind of veered onto libertarianism, and we're talking about basic natural rights or what rights people have, and it's really irrespective of what are written on pieces of paper or what legal claims are made. We're talking about do you actually consent to something, and a contract is something that, in order for a contract to be valid, that means something. It has to be an exchange of some sort, it has to be spelled out, it has to be precisely written about, and the idea that there's a social contract or that somebody can just decree that it's a social contract. If you're making a specific point about what a country's laws are, that's certainly something valid to talk about. But in the context of this discussion, we're talking about really what it means to have a contract, and in that sense, I would hold there is no social contract.
All right, I was just picking a little thing. That was all.
No, you're quite
the devil's advocate.
Right. Citizenship and all that, these are all man-made sort of laws and ways that have been used to achieve certain political outcomes that that you can talk about. But we're talking about really what does it mean for there to be a contract? And if you're born in a certain area, that doesn't mean you've signed up to a cell phone plan or a political system or anything.
No, of course not.
Good enough. Okay, well, welcome, Albert. Welcome, Bob.
Hi there.
All right. What crosses my mind is, in this idyllic libertarian philosophy society that you guys are dreaming about, where do I reach justice? How do I have to go to private industries to get my justice? Where is justice?
Still a justice system.
Anybody's negligence in a libertarian society.
All right. First of all, it helps if you don't poison the well. Everybody's idyllic. We're all these starry-eyed dreamers.
Well, I don't want to hurt you guys' feelings by just describing something accurately, but go ahead, Jeff.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, come on.
I'd rather go ahead and say what's on your mind.
I just laid it out. Where am I going to get justice in the libertarian society? Private industry, correct?
No.
Yeah, well, maybe we have different answers on this.
Yes. Okay. Well, Jeff first and then Tim.
Just in short, justice and dispute resolution is something that is in demand. It is being done by the. There is such a thing. There are private arbitration companies now who do what probably on the face of it is a better job than the government versions because people actually pay for it voluntarily rather than by force. Most of the disputes.
Well, the thing about arbitration companies, though, is that people can still renege. Am I using the word correctly?
Renege, yeah, that's right.
I think so.
Yeah. Like, I remember hearing at least once of a case where somebody used an arbitration company to settle a dispute, and then they went along and did what they wanted instead. So they don't have a force behind them like government does.
Well, in a free society, and this is a huge topic, but dispute resolution. First of all property would be privately owned. There wouldn't be any such thing as government property. So there would be a much stronger incentive for people to agree to abide by recognized, reputable dispute resolution firms, of which there would likely be more than one. And there would also be, of course, an appellate process because we do recognize that firms from time to time can make mistakes, or we would want somebody acting on our behalf, just like with car insurance. So if you cannot abide by somebody else's car insurance, but there are incentives for you to do that. You would not be allowed on the roads, and if the roads were private, you might not be allowed on private roads in a free society without insurance. So if you don't abide, if you are literally an outlaw, and you don't agree to abide by these things in a free society, you will have a lot of trouble having access to other people's private property. Again, there's no public property, so people own roads and all that. And if you're an outlaw and if you are known to not conform to any basic standards about property, people will not want you on their property. They will not want to do business with you. They will not want to sell you goods and services. They will not want to hire you. So these are the kinds of things that in a free society would take the place of the raw force that's used by the state. But it's not a utopia. There's this in your dream world and all of that, but we don't live in a utopia now, so comparing libertarianism to a dream world is not any more appropriate than comparing the current system to a dream world. So.
All right, Jeff. Tim, are you back? You dropped out for a sec. Tim, are you there? Tim, could you just give the other libertarian viewpoint of what I just asked? Is all justice privatized in the libertarian philosophy of society?
In my opinion, it's not. I think that it is necessary to still have a government-ran justice system. The problem is, like something about me that you know, Bunto, but not everyone else here knows, is that I'm a felon. I've been to prison. I'm on parole right now. I've experienced our justice system firsthand. And one thing I can tell you is that it does not work. If you're going to have a libertarian society with justice, first of all, you need to eliminate victimless crimes. And secondly, you need to concentrate on rehabilitation as opposed to punishment, because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I give the example of Norway. Norway has one of the lowest crime rates and one of the lowest prison populations, percentage of its population of any country. And the reason it does is because they have given prisoners live in more of a dorm society, a sort of apartments. They have more rights. They take classes. They engage in all kinds of therapy. These are things that for a lot of prisoners in America are not provided. Although they are, to some extent, the prison system is still focused on punishment as opposed to
rehabilitation. Is that necessarily just libertarianism that would provide this? Can't we? Because it sounds like something that's just a reform, not necessarily something that can only be done under libertarianism.
No, it's a reform. I mean, you could. I mean, Norway is not necessarily a libertarian society, but you could implement it in any society, I suppose. The problem is that libertarianism, unless you have a society that treats an individual as a sovereign person and eliminates victimless crimes, the justice system is not going to be as effective as we would want it to be. It's not going to be able to focus on rehabilitation. I mean, that's my take on it.
I would just say a few things. First of all, one of the arguments libertarians make, or the main argument is that we are not central planners. So I don't know how every industry would evolve over time. But
Right.
one thing is for sure, every industry would change over time and tend towards, with competition and all of the incentives that we experience, even to the extent we have somewhat of a free market now, they would tend towards improvement because just the incentives are there.
An
But,
equilibrium, right?
Right. Anyway, yeah, I don't want to haggle with whether the government should do it or not. I tend to think not. I think they've been doing it for 300 years, and I don't know when we're supposed to stick a fork in it. And
Pretty much fucking it up. Yeah.
It's the political system, but I do strongly feel like under a libertarian system, a libertarian sort of non-system, that justice would be strictly restorative. That there would not be a demand or that people just wouldn't want to pay for it if nothing else. They may not want people to use drugs, but but justice would be restorative. It would be, is there a victim? Now you can talk about what happens if your loved one is killed, and how does that work? And that's basically just not to get bogged down into that, but that's basically you would just like in a will, you would have the rights to act on behalf of somebody who's gone and to seek restoration for your loss.
How about this? In the short end, you are saying that yes, justice can be assured in the libertarian system, better than our own system.
Well,
Much better.
I tend to think it would have to be better than our current system.
Okay.
Which is horrible. Horrible.
Yeah, I don't know how it could be worse.
Okay. Bob, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Bob, any viewpoints on libertarian philosophy for a society?
Well, to be honest, I think our law system's a bit different over here anyway. So...
Yeah, please extrapolate.
Well, I'm not entirely sure how it is in America, but from what I've heard, it's mostly... The law system is mostly financially based, and...
Yes.
Whereas here, I do feel you get more rights. I mean, the court system, people do tend to have more ability to stand their own ground and make their own case in point, and it's a lot more liberal over here, I think.
Much better. It's much better.
We are swaying towards the same kind of system as you guys. So our NHS is going privatised soon, and our Royal Mail system's gone privatised just last year. So we're becoming more and more American, I think.
Well, I wish our postal system would be privatized.
It's about to cave in.
It would work much better.
Yeah, it absolutely would work.
My
much
dad
better.
actually works for the post office.
Who does? Your dad?
Albert's dad.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So
Okay.
he would have a different opinion, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, if you're a postal worker, you're not going to. If you work at McDonald's, you're not going to bash McDonald's. But
I don't know. I work at Taco Bell and I fucking hate it.
Right. I
John has arrived. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me see. We've talked. Okay, go ahead, Albert.
So about libertarianism, I never, looked up the definition to see exactly what it was, but it sounds like basically bottom-up form of government, right?
That's a good way to put it. It's
I think that
part of it. I'm sorry, you froze up.
Oh, okay. So the way I view government is basically everything needs to be negotiated on basically every single way you could think of, including not having both bottom up and top down. In fact, I wrote a post about it about this viewpoint. I gave it a name. Can you see it? Can you see the screen that I'm showing you?
Yes. Okay, Albert.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is this post. So do you want me to read it or?
I can read it. How about that? Let me practice my voice here. I've been trying to find a word that describes my philosophy on how to handle government and life. The closest I could find was not accurate enough, so I am inventing a new word. Negotiism?
Yes.
Negotiism, the belief that people ought to seek out and promote that which they can agree upon, and balance that which they do not agree upon in a way that they can agree upon, in order to ensure the equality, security, and freedom of all those involved. The word that approximated my belief was progressivism, as it is illustrated here. Difference between blah, 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 blah. It was more like the method I would follow in order to adhere to my philosophy, rather than the philosophy itself.
Ah,
Negotiism.
you're pretty smart kid, Albert.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely like it. Negotiation is peaceful. It's that's a hallmark of libertarianism. It's about persuasion rather than coercion. That's kind of how we say it. I'll just give you a very quick definition of libertarianism, at least philosophical libertarianism, and that is
How do I turn off the screen share?
you just click it again in the side. I think it's off now. I mean, I see you.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, it finally got off my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So libertarian.
So anyway, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. The first side would be it's about self-ownership. You own yourself. You own your body, and as an outgrowth of that, you own the product of your labor. We're physical beings. We're not disembodied ghosts. So we our nature is that we have we're creative and that we own the output of our labor. Whatever we transform in nature to something of value, it's ours. It's ours to trade for. It's ours to give away if we want to, or anything of the kind. But the other side is the negative side, or the corollary, and that is we say it's the prohibition in libertarianism is simply that you can't initiate force or fraud against other people. So you own yourself, and we say initiate because once somebody else initiates force or fraud, we recognize that you may have to retaliate proportionally. There's all kinds of literature on that and application, but the gist of it is that you can retaliate as needed to protect yourself, and you can get into specifics on that or debate about to what extent that should happen. But those are kind of the two pillars. It doesn't mean you have to defend yourself, by the way. You can be a pacifist libertarian. That's fine. And that's
they don't defend it. Interesting, Jeff.
Yeah.
Pyong, are you there? How you doing? He's there.
Yeah, how you doing? Sorry,
How
I
you
done
doing?
mute. Good. How
Okay.
you doing? Hi,
How about-
everybody.
Here we go. Just the system that's completely privatized. Feasible?
Oh, I don't know. What do you mean by privatize? No, I would have to say no. because of corruption in a word, or the possibility of corruption.
Manipulating the system.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Even more so than today.
right. I would have to point out that that is a hallmark of our current system.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
we
true,
already
yeah.
warehouse
Yeah.
people.
And it's a lot less in check than it would be in a private system where there would be competing, I would argue, where there would be competing dispute resolution systems or whatever you want to call them. There would be...
But we couldn't call it justice, could we?
Well, justice.
we absolutely
is more
could call
of
it a justice system,
amorphous.
absolutely.
Jeff, I like the idea. I really do. It's just that I wasn't even talking about necessarily the ability of individuals participating in the mechanism to be corrupted, but rather the individuals who make policy, who will fundamentally drive where the system goes or how it's implemented. That's what I'm talking about. Though, if you could remove that corruption, I'd be. I don't know if I would be an advocate of it, but I'd be definitely willing to listen to it. But
well, I don't know. I don't know how long you've been in the conversation. We were sort of talking about libertarianism in general, and then I guess everybody else is totally sold on libertarianism. So now we're just talking about the courts.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the...
No.
Okay, sorry, I missed a bunch.
Albert, there are two of you, Albert.
Two places at once. Hey.
There are two of you, Albert. What's going on here?
Albert, stop
my
hamming it
internet
up.
messed up.
Good job, Tim.
My internet messed up. So, yeah.
Don't
so
worry about it. It
I hadn't
happens.
paid my bill for a while, so now I paid it, and I finally got my internet back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Finally got my internet back. Oh.
But every once
Welcome
in
to
a while,
privatized internet.
Really? Privatized packet.
yeah. Yeah, so I have Time Warner Cable's everyday low price internet, so and I end up always paying the bill late, like about a month or two. So every time they do that, they make the internet well, on my screen it goes from connected to limited, and that basically means that I can't do anything with it. So once the bill goes through, then it's fine, but occasionally it'll go into limited every once in a while, probably as an after effect.
So actually, getting back, and this kind of actually has something to do with what I was saying. So
Really?
we were talking about privatizing. That's become a word that's kind of in things like Time Warner and Xfinity, where a private company will get a.
Well, the problem with Time Warner is.
Can I just finish my thought?
Sorry.
We are talking about abstract things, and your internet situation.
No,
is
I was about to
interesting, but
talk
it's-
about an abstract thing. It was about monopolies.
Well, I'm almost done. So anyway, so when we say privatize, what that a lot of times unfortunately means is it's granting an exclusive contract to one or two providers like Time Warner and Xfinity and these people in a different area. What we were talking about earlier was a free market in everything, basically, and a real free market, not one where it's politicized, where one in which people gain or lose but based on how well they meet the needs of their customers, not too big to fail, not stuff like that. So that's it.
You know, I've never met a libertarian that I didn't like personally.
You like us all, huh?
Every libertarian that I've met, I think they've been personally responsible. They've been, they think the best of people. You know, they have evaluated their own ideological position and they've arrived at a conclusion, and I really appreciate that. However,
I knew there was a however in there.
I was looking for but. He'd use however.
I've been buttered up now, and here we go.
I have some substantial problems with the pragmatic application of libertarianism, and it's, you know, not big stuff, but they are kind of fundamental, like the way I think people act and the way that they behave. And for example, if everybody were honest and they pulled their own weight, and they wanted to be treated well, and
then government would work.
Yeah, libertarianism would work. Yes, that's.
We didn't even need government if humans were
Then
perfect.
we would, yeah, it would be easy. But you know, people cheat. People don't really like to compete, in my opinion. I think that people like to cooperate.
Sure.
And one thing that came to my mind when you were talking, as long as you have an interest that is administrating, then there must be some kind of bias. There just has to be. That's kind of how it works. And so we have. I don't know what your position is on regulation. Are you for regulation, right? Or
Well,
no?
I actually think the market and insurance companies and actual stakeholders would tend to be far better regulators than a coercive state, which is by the political process, which I think it's.
Isn't that self-regulation, though, to have businesses responsible for regulating businesses? And you never want self-regulation.
Well,
some business. No, that's collectivist thinking. So, yes, some businesses will regulate other businesses. Some businesses will be in the business of strictly regulating. They'll sell magazines.
I see.
They'll sell magazines like Consumer Reports.
Well,
Consumer reports on things. I mentioned the Underwriters Lab, that any electronic product that you want to buy is going to have the UL label on it. because
Isn't that
nobody
basically
wants.
part of what government is? A regulator that we pay for?
Here's the thing. The whole theory behind laissez-faire is that eventually, if the market will self-regulate and it will reach an equilibrium naturally. The problem is that when you have government regulation, that's the theory. All right, that's the theory. I'm not saying I subscribe to it, Pyong. I'm not saying I subscribe to it.
Oh, dude, I'm sorry. I thought I was muted. I'm terribly sorry, bro. I wasn't laughing at what you were saying. Your roommate was behind you doing a crazy symbol.
What were you doing? That's my boyfriend. What were you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry, bro.
Oh, you're doing that? Yeah. Well, you know what? That's because I'm not totally subscribed to the laissez-faire philosophy. I think that there needs to be a modicum of regulation, but I think that we have far too much of it as it is. I don't think it will reach a natural equilibrium. I mean, that's just my take on it. So.
Well, okay. Well, let me see. Modicum of regulation would be the Ten Commandments, right?
Hell no.
What the
Destroy
fuck?
that shit.
But I mean, what is the point of libertarianism if it's not applicable? That's really what Pyong's point is.
Like I said, I'm a libertarian with a small L. Okay. All right.
Well, that normally means you're not a member of the Libertarian Party. So you mean you're not really you're libertarian on a lot of issues, but not all issues. Correct?
Mostly social issues, yeah. But Pyong, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, okay. Here's based on what Jeff said earlier. Like they would have a magazine, right? That was the profit driver.
That was
that you were
one
talking
example.
about.
One example.
Yeah. But a market. There has to be a market. I mean, this is a ridiculous statement. Forgive me for it, but there has to be a market for a market. Just selling magazines. I know that there are other examples. But that wouldn't necessarily drive the amount of interest, drive the amount of money that might be necessary to effectively regulate. So I think I agree that our regulation system right now is terrible, and part of that is because of the influence that special interests exert on foreign and domestic policy, but also because of the revolving door of bureaucrats with private industry. So, and that's a problem that could be maybe intensified. If one regulatory agency were very, very successful, what would prevent them?
Wait, a very slight veer off for a second. What do you think of term limits for
okay, you're changing the subject, please. Can we stay on one topic?
No, but what I mean is, like, he was talking about.
He just asked a question about what happens when a regulatory.
Let's concentrate on the question, John.
It's kind of rude to keep changing the subject.
All right.
Go ahead.
If we do, let's acknowledge that we're changing the subject.
Okay.
So can you repeat your question? Was what happens if a regulatory agency becomes too successful?
Well, you understand what I'm saying with regard to the revolving door with our current bureaucracies, right?
Right.
For example, Tom Wheeler was ridiculous coming in to head the FCC.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. That I could see that when you had a privatized system without some kind of control that was beyond the privatized system, and I'm speaking very generally here. I would be concerned about that.
But your example is pointing out that happened in a government system, correct?
No, yeah, and as I said, our government system is. Go ahead.
If the worst that we can come up with about a capitalist system is that the same thing that would happen as the government system, that's a wash, isn't it?
I'm not necessarily saying that a libertarian system would be worse than what we have now, because what we have now is bad.
Pretty fucking bad, yeah.
I would ask you to consider, though, if something goes on in a private company where there is competition and people are generally unhappier, where do you think the change is most likely to occur? Is it going to happen in the political system where you may hate this FCC guy, but you like the guy who appointed him because this is all in the political system, the chances of that guy getting unthroned, he's going to have to do something really horrific. Whereas in a private firm that's competing for your dollars, where you can just on a dime say, I don't like that guy, I'm going to the competition, they're going to be much more responsive to getting the kind of people that are agreeable to their customers than in the political system. No?
That's a great point, Jeff, and that's exactly why I said earlier that I don't believe that people naturally want to compete. I think that people want to cooperate. That's why we have, for example, antitrust law.
Well, I was just going to agree. I was going to agree with you on that point. People would rather not compete, myself included. And that's why that's why they run to the government to get all kinds of protections. They want to be protected against foreign trade. They want to do things like regulatory capture, which we were talking about earlier, where laws that favor existing companies, that make it harder for new companies to comply. They want to do all of these things. But guess what they need to do that? They need a government. They need force. They need violence. You're right. And the libertarian position is not just the pro-business position. It's the pro-everybody position. And these nobody's too big to fail in the libertarian situation. If you don't meet the needs of your customers, you either have to change your ways, reorganize, or you're out of business. Whereas that's not the case now.
Well, I was speaking specifically. Pardon me if somebody started to speak, or if I interrupted you. But I was speaking. Go ahead.
Oh, actually, all I was going to say is that I actually have to go. It was great meeting you, Jeff, Albert.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me, Bunto. It's been great. All right, but I'll talk to you guys later. All right.
Glad to
take it easy.
Bye bye.
Right, bye bye.
Okay, go ahead, Pyong.
I was speaking specifically to this idea that competition can be a driver for problem solving, because I don't think I think a lot of people assume that competition is the status quo. That people, because they hear this hyperbolic rhetoric from businessmen, and I hear it all the time, where they say, "I'm a competitor. I want to get out there, and I want to destroy the competition," which is that's not really what I see. I see people who want to get to the top of the pile, such that they can somehow exert control on price constraints and determine price, and then they want to keep it there. And they're willing to bring other people. It's a cartel.
Sure, everybody would like that. We all want to work for the least amount of effort. That's why we have labor-saving devices and all of those things. And I would say probably the number of people who really want to compete for the sake of competing is probably, as you say, very, very outside of the sports realm. Probably very, very rare. And even in the sports realm, people would rather win than compete, but they to win, they have to compete, and in a free market to win, which hopefully would be somebody's highest goal, that they have to compete. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all there. You did mention antitrust. We can talk about that if you want to. I think that's a separate topic.
The only reason I brought up. The only reason I brought up antitrust, we don't have to get into a discussion about the Sherman Act or anything like that, but rather was that antitrust is an example of people not, it's anti-competition law, if you will,
Well, I would invite anybody here to read a really good book called The Myth of the Robber Barons by Burton Folsom.
The Myth of the Robber Barons. Okay.
The Myth of the Robber Barons. And what he does, first of all, is he doesn't say that there were no
Gilded Age, right?
He doesn't say there wasn't a Gilded Age, but what he does is he makes a distinction economically between a coercive and a non-coercive monopoly. So you did indeed have coercive monopolies, and why were they coercive? They were exclusive contracts given to the most connected businesses at the time to build railroads and all of that. So competing against them was the Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt was one of them. The Fulton Steam Line, and nobody could compete.
Now that's a very hard case. The Myth of the Robber Barons. I mean, that's a hard cell there, Jeff.
Well, you can handle it. I've heard you. I've heard you handle other things. You're a big boy.
All right, Jeff.
You
Okay,
can.
that's a good one.
I'm
Okay,
sure
but
you
something
have to
jumped in my
wrap
mind, Jeff. I just wanted to say this. Okay, something that Tim said that was very interesting before he left was he said he's a libertarian with a small case L. All right? In your mind, Jeff, could you exist in would you enjoy dealing with a small case L libertarian society, or do you need to have full big L libertarian philosophy in your society?
Well, I'm no dummy. I like improvement, and I could be very happy in Tim's world. We could haggle over the last 2 or 5% of government or whatever would be left. So that would be a vast improvement. Although I would have to caution that it's kind of been the case in history that when governments get really small, people tend to be very prosperous and happy. And while they're being prosperous and happy, the politicians are figuring out how to get all of that wealth, and that's why the United States government, which is the first one that really had a constitution that limited to the extent that it was supposed to, actually has become the biggest government on the planet, has bases in 170 or so countries, probably the biggest government in the galaxy. I don't know, it's huge. So that's the risk, but no, I want less is better when it comes to the state. And I absolutely would. The perfect need not be the enemy of the good, but that doesn't mean we in order to get to a good spot, we should know what the ideal is, and we should think in principles, and that's what I aspire to do. But
go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was going to ask Pyong something. Just to clarify something, so I'm not putting words in his mouth or anything. When you said people aren't competitive, did you mean within the confines of the business world or just in general?
Well, okay. If I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit.
Please.
I think that there really are instances of scarcity that people have to compete for. Compete for resources and things of that sort.
sure.
But I think that most of the competition that we're exposed to as human beings is completely artificial. For example, you might have, depending on what educational courses you take or what school you pursue, you might have what's called a bell curve. Have you ever heard of that? Where they have a certain amount of A's and a certain amount of B's and a certain amount of C's.
Right.
And you compete for those. Sports, sports is yes, there's competition in sports, absolutely, but it's completely synthetic. It's created through a tremendous amount of cooperation.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Most of the market is cooperative. That's absolutely true.
And with regard to what I was saying about business, I think it's so businesses are so dynamic, and there are so many elements into any kind of analysis. But as a rule of thumb, I would say when somebody is smaller and they're able to get over the barriers of entry that Jeff mentioned a little bit earlier, but if they're smaller and they're able to get into a market, yes, they're competing. No question, they're competing. But as they get bigger, there's a tendency for them not to compete. And this is there was an interesting book about Bell Labs that was published, I think, 3 years ago. And they talked about Bell Labs. I don't know how familiar you are with them, but they came up with some incredible stuff like the C programming language, among other things. They also they were basically the research arm, the R&D department for Ma Bell. Which was a big telecom monopoly a long time ago in the United States, and they actually had a working cell phone system in the mid-'60s, and they sat on it. And the reason they sat on it was because they rightly understood, if we market this, we're going to lose our landline service. We're going to lose lose this revenue stream. So and beyond that. You start, as a separate example, like I say, how when you get larger you compete less. That's when you're able to really have an effect on market price. Let me explain a little bit. Cartels. We deal with OPEC, which is an oil cartel. They essentially control market price for oil. Right now, the Saudis are fighting with the Iranians, so oil prices are extremely low. And the reason is because of Saudi supply. You see, and that's an example of a cartel where these suppliers have gotten together and they essentially exert so much control over the market that they can set price, and they like it that way. So that's specifically what I was talking about, Bob.
Oh, okay.
So you brought up a couple different issues. First of all, you brought up Bell Labs, and I agree with you. There is a tendency for companies to, this happened with Ford. You know, Ford came up with assembly lines and all this great innovation that made cars affordable to the masses, and then they kind of wanted to rest on their laurels and just keep doing that, so they resisted making cars different colors and different styles, like people were starting to demand.
You can get a car in any color, but it has to be
as long as it's black, yeah. and stuff like that. So there is that, and that's why they tend to move towards the state to get protected. Oh, these foreigners are competing with us, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. So yeah, that does happen. I don't know that much about the cell phone issue, so I'll take a pass on that. But then you brought up cartels. It's interesting. Cartels are notoriously difficult to enforce by the would-be cartel owners, and it's interesting. Even with the OPEC cartels, actually, U.S. production has been instrumental in driving the costs down, and they've tried even among themselves. They've tried among themselves to hold on the, to hold back oil, and even members of the cartel don't want to do that. So it's notorious in cartels that somebody always wants to undermine the rest of the cartel, and they want to give a kickback. And so what you usually find with cartels in general is that somebody's kicking back to somebody and getting a competitive advantage. They're just notoriously hard to uphold. But in general, if you don't want concentrations of power, and this is a whole other issue, but you don't want a state to protect these interests against competition and to keep the smaller firms out, because in many ways they do have an advantage. They don't have legacy costs. They don't have entrenched bureaucracies that they don't know what to do with, and so forth. So basically, a lot of effort goes into keeping competition out of markets, and for the reasons that you mentioned. People don't like competition, but they also like to have market share, and that's why cartels are really notoriously bad at enforcing that. Even ones as entrenched as the OPEC states, they don't want oil to be 40 some cents a gallon, or I'm sorry, 40 a barrel.
That's a barrel. Under $50 a barrel right now. But the reason the oil is low now is not because of American production; it's because of Saudi dumping. But that we can agree to disagree on that if you like.
Well, if that's the case, if it's Saudi dumping, then they're going against the cartels.
Well, they're
that would be.
They're banging Iran's economy.
Right.
They want to reduce the amount of money that Iran has.
So this is how nicely cartels work. They undermine each other.
No, Saudi and I don't think is a. But anyway, there have been incredibly successful cartels, and I don't think you're arguing for cartels, because
I'm saying they're not as big an object of fear as anti-market people like to make them out to be, and I'm not saying.
But see, what I think, we're talking at a little bit at cross purposes, because if you want to talk about actual competition, you would eliminate cartels, because cartels are anti-competitive. You see what I'm saying?
I'm talking about a free market. In a free market, you would be allowed to have a cartel if you wanted to. I'm saying that
now
I'm saying that competition is an effect of a free market, and I'm also saying that even in a cartel, some of the aspects of competition tend to rear their ugly heads, and when you are not restricting other smaller firms from getting into that industry, that undermines your ability to set up and maintain a cartel even more. So if you want fewer cartels, theoretically you can have a cartel. There's nothing legally wrong with it, but if you want it to be ineffective, you have a free market. You have people who can get in and undermine you. Or if by some fluke the cartel is actually serving everybody better than anybody else could possibly do it, then great, that's okay. That helps the consumer.
Right. That would be a pragmatic argument, but the fact is that typically they don't.
Principled argument
Typically, what
also.
they do is they reduce the number of services that are available, or the product, as you were talking about with Ford earlier. And that's exampled right now by at least my cable provider. I remember in 1990, my cable bill was something like $40 a month or something, and I had probably 3 times as many channels as I have now.
Your cable situation is different from your from the oil cartels.
It's a monopoly
because you have to buy from them. At least with the oil companies, I can buy from Exxon or BP or a third party. I mean, I can do.
Well, those are refiners, though. The producers. Okay, and we don't even have to talk about oil. I agree with what you're saying. There's always cheating in cartels. That's absolutely right. But the damage that cartels do could take decades before a cartel would spin out of control. And it might never spin out of control. Did you know that there was a cartel at one point on tulips?
Yeah, in Holland? Yeah.
Cartels controlled the diamond trade for a long time, and they artificially bloated diamond prices. Same thing with tulips, of course, and with oil.
Diamond prices are still,
but it still doesn't mean
very common, aren't they?
It still doesn't mean they can name their price, because tulips have to compete with other things that people buy. So theoretically, if there was only one source of a good, and you could only get it, they have to compete with all the other stuff that you can get. And
right, but I didn't
people
say.
Don't,
I said that they established price constraints. I didn't say that they controlled prices. I agree with you that even if you had a monopoly, there would be other price constraints on your goods, no matter what, substitute goods and that sort of thing. Right. But they can have a massive effect on it.
Right.
So, but anyway, so.
But what you want, theoretically there can be a monopoly under both kinds of systems. But in a free market system, the monopoly is going to be the one that best serves their consumers. So if somebody becomes if my company makes the best shoes, and nobody can figure out my secret recipe to making shoes, and I can sell them for 5 cents a piece, and nobody can touch that, then there's nothing that says there have to be 2 shoe producers. Right. So I should be allowed to sell shoes for 5 cents a piece, but that's so hard. That's so unbelievably difficult to happen without using government or coercion that it sounds ridiculous to even suggest it. But for a while, some company, IBM was a very dominant, not complete market share, but they had a very dominant one. So you're going to have theoretically you can have either way, but if you're going to have a monopoly, you want one that's a monopoly because they've satisfied their customers and made their lives better, not because they've curried favor with the government like Comcast or Time Warner, and just.
Wait, are you saying that some monopolies are good?
Yes, a market share monopoly, we would call a non-coercive monopoly. Yes, if somebody made a product that was so good, and this almost never happens. They made a product that was so good that nobody could compete with it, not because they were not allowed to by force or by government, but because they couldn't make those goods or services as efficiently as the one monopoly company, then yes, that would be a very good thing.
Well, the thing about a good monopoly is the same thing as a good dictator. Every once in a
Oh, that was good, Albert.
Replaced, and then it won't be as good.
Then that's a golden opportunity for a competitor. Then they're not going to be a monopoly for very long.
One thing I would point out, though, is that many times, if you're a monopoly and if you do a tremendous amount of business and you get a lot of influence and you get a lot of cash, one thing that you do as a human being, again, because and this goes with what I was saying before about not wanting to compete, frequently you create barriers to entry so that you don't have to compete with individuals. When Microsoft got in trouble for what they were doing with Netscape, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
They were trying to strangle channels of distribution, and they went to computer manufacturers and they said, "Listen, we want only Internet Explorer to be on these computers, and if you don't do what we say, then you're not going to get Windows." Remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
It was their operating system, and they had a right to do that, in my judgment.
Well, but what the problem is, and my point is, that they were trying to establish barriers to entry by strangling channels of distribution. So your method of solving market problems with competition must facilitate the entry of new competitors into the market.
First of all, they were giving away a browser, so this wasn't necessarily injurious to the people involved. They couldn't name their price, but yes, when you buy a car, you buy a General Motors car. It used to be you always had a Delco radio, and you have this kind of battery and that kind of thing. That's entirely up to them. The aftermarket people will sell replacements, but for people who didn't want that, now we have Linux, and I think that's partly in response to that. We have Linux, we have Apple operating systems, and
well, my point though, Jeff, is that when a firm gets large enough where they get the influence and the money in order to do it, they will typically attempt to create barriers to entry for smaller firms who might come into their field. That's what I'm referring to. Because
they will seek competitive advantage in whatever peaceful way they can do that. Now, I'm not a fan of copyright and laws like that. So if you want to get into that, that's sort of unique to the computer industry. But just assuming they're selling a product, and if they want to put their browser in it, and people still want to buy their operating system, even if that's not their favorite browser, then the markets are not about perfection. They're about what people voluntarily buy, and what people buy is far more reflective by what they spend their real money on than by what they say they really want and don't want. So without actually paying for it.
What I can't
appreciate what you're saying.
Why did anybody have a problem with with Microsoft enforcing the Internet Explorer being on their operating system?
Well, because if you're interested in having a fair marketplace where you can say, okay, Netscape has a browser, I like Netscape's browser, Windows has Internet Explorer, I get to choose as a consumer which one I'm going to utilize. Then if you like that kind of idea, then you have to have a place where you can use both of them. You have the opportunity to use both of them. And what Microsoft was doing was they were going to the computer manufacturers and they were saying, no, you cannot put Netscape on this computer. So they were actually depriving consumers of the option of using Netscape unless they wanted to get on there.
You could still add Netscape to a computer.
Right. Yes, that's what I was. That's what I was saying.
But Microsoft was making the browser, integrating the browser with other features, like it was starting to combine the cloud with. It wasn't called the cloud back then, but they were combining the cloud with their client products and stuff like that, and so they wanted to have that kind of platform. Arguably, I think it was a tremendous injustice to go after Microsoft. It's their product.
Let me ask you this,
They can
Jeff.
make whatever deals they want with their vendors, as long as they don't violate the property of somebody else. Just like General Motors can say, you can have this kind of battery or that kind of battery.
Okay, I appreciate your position, and I can't argue with your position. That's your opinion, and I'm happy to accept that. However, if you're talking about competition, solving problems in the marketplace, then you can't have these restrictions on entering into the marketplace. That goes against the idea of dispute resolution through competition.
you can, if you're selling something, you can restrict, you can have whatever features you want on it. You can use your own in-house products on it. You can use third-party vendors. This is the question is not that there should always be a competitor. Microsoft dominated the market in that time for whatever reason, because people would rather have Microsoft's operating system, even with the maybe not their favorite browser, but on balance, just as I would buy a car, because maybe I don't like everything about that car, but I like enough about that car that I will take whatever kind of batteries in it because I like the rest of the car enough. So,
I think at that point, now I may be mistaken, and I'm happy to be mistaken, but I think at that point actually Internet Explorer was behind Netscape, and so they were,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Netscape was pretty dominant.
Yeah. Okay, but be that as it may, I think you understand my point. You know, if you are going to use the markets to solve problems, then you can't restrict entrance into them.
And also, things aren't frozen in time. So as technology evolves, maybe it's become such that the browser is really integrated into the operating system, and really there shouldn't be this separate functionality for a browser. We don't know that. So think of a market not as ever achieving perfection. It's like the waves. You know, they go up and down, and they're constantly trying to find the sweet spot. But with progress and all of that, that's why net neutrality is such a horrible idea, because if you have if you freeze it in this one bottle, you're just going to kill innovation. That's a pragmatic argument. I think it's unjust anyway.
Wait a minute, hold on here. Is it? Can we take a? Bob asked a question in the. I have a definite opinion on net neutrality, by the way, but I want to hear what you understand that as being. What was your question, Bob?
Sorry, I didn't want to cut these off, so I put it in the chat. Basically, I'm feeling kind of ignorant here because I think the US works slightly different. I was just asking anyone really who regulates the market in the US what kind of regulations are in place, things like that. I mean, you're talking about monopolies and things like that, but there's quite heavy restrictions over here on how you can monopolize certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering what the difference is.
Well, typically what will happen is with monopolies, a monopoly per se, or I should say a colloquial use of the term monopoly is not necessarily illegal. But what will happen is if something violates a particular act, the Department of Justice will bring suit against them on behalf of the people of the United States. And they'll try to bust them up that way. That's typically how it's done with monopolies. There are various bureaucracies that handle regulation of different markets. For example, the bond market and trading on the stock exchange.
And I would add, once you're targeted as a potential monopoly, you cannot win, because if you overcharge your customers, then you're gouging. And if you undercharge your customers, then you're doing predatory pricing. If you charge your customers the same, you can be charged with conspiracy or price fixing. So it's quite a witch hunt in the U.S. As far as like legal monopolies, those are franchises, cable companies, stuff like that, where people where exclusive franchises are granted within a particular area, and it's actually illegal to compete with. In my town, it's illegal to compete with Comcast for cable services. We can use. We don't have FiOS, so we can use DirecTV, which is not the same as cable. But
I have two things to say about that. A colloquial use of the term monopoly could be patents. Patent.
I agree.
A similar.
I agree.
Type. Right.
I think patents. I'm opposed to patents and copyrights.
And then, but I totally agree with what Jeff said. If you catch a case from the feds, but under the Sherman Act, you're fucked.
Yeah. The Microsoft thing was I think a witch hunt. I mean,
but companies are allowed to.
Microsoft was operating pretty independently from the federal government. They weren't playing the they weren't playing the game in Washington. I don't even think they had an office in Washington. If it was not a lobbying office, and they just needed to be shown dressed down by those in charge. I remember that whole fiasco.
But companies in the US are allowed to assert dominance and build a monopoly to whatever level they want. Is that right? Provided they're within the restrictions of law.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
if they become dominant in a market, there are all kinds of business practices that can put them in harm's way as far as being dealt with as a monopoly. And if you're in the, I'm sorry.
But it is in general it is allowed within the confines of law.
Well, yeah, if you say within the confines of law, yes. I mean, it was just like what Jeff was. I don't know if he has an example of somebody who achieved monopoly status in a way where they were the only provider of a good because of the price or access or whatever.
There are very few.
Yeah, that would be possible, and you could indeed become a monopoly and not break any laws. It's just that typically that's not how it works. There's usually some kind of shenanigans going on. So.
Well, it's funny.
Once they become, go ahead.
I mean, one of the main reasons for the Sherman antitrust laws were Standard Oil, which had become a powerhouse. They had an extraordinary market share. It wasn't 100%, but it was very high. But if you look at how they got it by making kerosene affordable. Kerosene was out of the reach of most poor middle-class people. When candles did not keep homes very light, and when it got dark, wasn't a whole lot you could do. You had to really use your imagination. And Rockefeller lit up the world, added hours to people's lives, and improved their standard of living in ways that no government official certainly could ever do. And he was actually pilloried for having made things cheaper for people. And the one little known fact about, maybe you know because you guys are smarter than the average bears, but Rockefeller actually saved the whale.
Spermaceti, right?
Well, at the time it was cheaper to get oil from whales, and whales were becoming extinct, and Rockefeller found a much more efficient way of getting oil out of the ground. So most environmentalists don't hold up pictures of John D. Rockefeller, and he was a really bad statist in other areas after all this came about. But he was. But if you take Standard Oil, what were we being protected from? We were being protected from amazing products, life-changing products, and in some cases environmentally better products. So.
Well, innocuous and successful beginnings don't preclude bad acts later on, and that's my position on that. If they had some kind, I'm not familiar, frankly, with what you're talking about with Standard Oil, so I can't really comment on it. But the you said the basis of the Sherman Act was Standard Oil, was also U.S. Steel. There were also a lot of other places.
No, there were other ones too, but
yeah.
Breaking up Standard Oil that's why you have.
Can someone just clarify what is the Sherman Act?
Oh, the Sherman Act is an act that was passed that essentially encompasses a substantial portion of the body of antitrust law.
Yeah, under Teddy Roosevelt, and Sherman was the senator or congressman. He was actually the brother of Sherman's Army, infamous Sherman's Army.
Okay. And this is
Tecumseh Sherman. Yeah.
This is with regard to what we're talking about mostly, with like cartels and monopolies and that stuff. Most of that stuff is covered by a certain portion of the statute that is described as the Sherman Act. Of course, there are antitrust law covers a broad spectrum of behaviors, and it goes far beyond the Sherman Act. But that's what the Sherman Act.
Well, okay, can I just to offer this? Okay, we were going to talk about net neutrality, but I just want to ask this quick question.
Ooh, net neutrality.
Let's suppose, Jeff, that in the next election we have a President Rand Paul. Okay, and he's decided to call himself the first libertarian president of the United States. And his first act is an executive order to close down the government for 1 fiscal year. Every government agency. And he could achieve this, let's say. Would that be called, in your mind, libertarianism?
Well, how would he be able to do that, though? He has
Let's
no...
just say he could, Albert. Jeff, would that be libertarianism in your mind?
Well, so it's kind of like asking if somebody burnt down a church, would there be atheism? so libertarianism is not just the physical existence of a government. And by the way, libertarianism can mean minimal government, just like the other person on here was advocating. So yes, if all of the if all of that stuff was marketized, I don't know if you could
To
say,
have no government is a libertarian government.
well, it would not be libertarian at the precise moment when they started to reopen it. So, and maybe the threat of having a government probably wouldn't be very libertarian either. So, yeah, if we,
Yes.
eliminating force and fraud is libertarianism. I guess if you do it for a year, it's libertarianism.
Pyong? Any
or
comment?
not necessarily eliminating it, but having a society that doesn't that is only focused on that eliminating force and fraud are the goals. And so to the extent that it does that, it would be libertarian.
Pyong? Any ideas?
And I wouldn't look for Rand Paul.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, I was waiting for Jeff to say Rand Paul is not a libertarian. But also,
He's
what
a
happened to Hillary?
conservative.
Did you kill Hillary, Bunto? In your hypothesis, did somebody or your hypothetical,
Well,
did somebody assassinate Hillary?
now that you brought it up, I did leave that out. No, but okay, a complete fiscal shutdown. I mean, for a complete year, that government shutdown for a fiscal year. Does that qualify as libertarianism in your mind? In your thinking?
Of course, there's still state
Or
government.
chaos?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think if a responsible it's like Jeff says, it's a collection of ideals. You shoot for it. You have to be pragmatic. And like Ron Paul, I thought Ron Paul was fascinating. I really liked him, and I liked the way that he behaved. I liked I liked his principles.
Yeah.
And I can't really say that I can speak on his behalf, but what I thought he was saying was if he was elected president, he wouldn't shut everything down right off the bat. I mean, he would implement policies that were more libertarian flavored, that kind of ran that kind of that had that particular type of ideology, but he wouldn't like.
Yeah,
didn't he say he wouldn't shut down welfare and that sort of thing, and if he were elected president?
he said he would end the wars. That would be his first. The first thing he would do would be to bring the troops home, end the wars, and then he recognized that to get from there to here would involve a lot of things. He wouldn't. And you can.
Well, you know what it is.
But he
wouldn't shut it all down right away, right?
Well, you know what that's called, gentlemen.
People are dependent on, and I'm not defending this entirely. Some would say no, you should just flip the switch.
Yeah, I mean
But,
that's a very pussy libertarian. He needs to shut down the government for a complete year to do it right. Correct?
You're a libertarian pope, dude. What are you talking about?
But I mean, he has to shut down everything for a year. Correct, Jeff? I mean, no government is a libertarian.
Not at all. I don't see that because I think if I stand, let me know if I'm incorrect here, Jeff, but I would imagine that, a libertarian believes that, government's main purpose is to defend, the rights, defend its borders, defend the rights of the people. So you're going to need agencies that do that. You're going to at least need a military, no?
Or privatize, Jeff.
The how you get to there from here is something that is an entirely different issue. Sometimes the best way it's a good idea to quit drinking, but maybe you don't quit drinking cold turkey. Maybe it's better, or if you're maybe drugs is a better example. Maybe you need to wean yourself off of it a little bit. So I don't know. I don't really have an A to Z plan for exactly how to get there, but overall, you would want to cut back the government to only its legitimate, semi-legitimate functions anyway, and then I would say just keep going. So, but if you were to just close it overnight, I don't think we would end up with libertarianism in the long run, because I think
That would be anarchism.
I don't think a lot of people would be bewildered, and they would look for some other authority figure. So, and it probably wouldn't be a libertarian. So.
Well, after Guatemala invaded us, Jeff, we'd be in quite a fix.
Why is Guatemala invading us?
Because we need to have a government, Pyong. We need to have a government. Hey, listen to me. There's no such thing as whittling down government to its legitimate functions and then cutting back more, as Jeff said. There's no such thing. Libertarian is an idyllic philosophy that has no practical application whatsoever.
Really?
Really?
And you demonstrated it when you said, yes, you could shut down the government for a complete year, and you would be willing to call that libertarianism. It's called anarchy, as Albert rightly said.
Where did you get that? First of all, I said maybe it wouldn't be wise to shut it all down at the same token. You're sort of.
Your first response was, yeah, you could call that libertarianism.
I gave you a very subtle, nuanced response. I understand your desire to set up a straw man, but I gave you a thoughtful approach. I can't predict the future. I said this is a philosophical movement as much as it is a practical one. Obviously, to be worth a damn philosophically, it has to also be practical. So if Rand Paul just shut down the government and nobody was really predisposed to libertarianism or anything like that, or what the prevailing philosophy was, and people were all of a sudden not getting what they've unfortunately come to depend on the government for, that would not be probably the best way to get there from here. I think you have to. It's primarily educational. It's not a top-down thing. Libertarianism is not top-down. It's not about one person pulling the plug. It's about a lot of little people realizing that they can do a lot more for themselves than they may be aware.
Okay, so your beef is against centralized government, central planning.
Yes.
What's wrong with that? To have a military, to have regulations, to have a collective of people looking out for the better interests of society on the whole.
Iraq, Afghanistan.
So the wars.
All the countries that are being invaded. Too big to fail. The crash of 2008. The inflation of the 70s. The Great Depression. You can go on and on and on. These are all things that had to do with central planning of economies and of other people throughout the world, and they've only led to the alleged more need justification to have them, which is quite a racket if you think about it.
Wait, how's the Great Depression due to central planning? Wasn't that because people were using credit too much?
Yeah, why do they use credit too
Fraud.
much? Because who controls money in banking? Who controls low interest rates? Who makes
until afterwards they started regulating the industry, Jeff. Beforehand, no, it was like there was so much riddled with fraud.
The Great Depression, the Depression of '29.
Yeah, there was FDIC came afterward.
I'm sorry, the Great Depression of '29 was well, the crash was in '29. It lasted until '46, till the end of World War I. So that was the first managed depression by the government. It lasted 15, 16 years. There was a depression in 1921. Very similar circumstances. It had to do with World War I. There was a severing of the gold standard. There was rampant inflation to pay for the war that the U.S. felt it had to be involved in, disastrously, I might add. But that's another category.
So
you
are
had
you
this-
saying
you
that
had
the depression was that the management of the depression was the problem?
Yes.
Ah.
So in 21 you had a very similar kind of depression. It was severe, but it was back in the days when uh, most people thought that these things have to be worked out, that the liquidation has to occur, that wages have to be allowed to fall, that interest rates have to be based on savings and not government edict. And so while this depression was no fun, it's become the forgotten depression. And the reason it's forgotten is because it was over in 18 months, completely over. I mean,
And then replaced with the Roaring Twenties.
and it was replaced with the Roaring Twenties, which
Is
did have
that
its,
why the
well,
Roaring
which did
Twenties
have
were
its,
treated that way? Like the reason why they spent and all such stuff because they were like, oh, we just went through a micro depression.
well,
And that's
unfortunately,
not what.
there was management of the company, there was mismanagement of the economy. There was a desire to keep the exchange rate low to protect the pound sterling because we're kind of Anglophiles and like to do that, and that kept interest rates down and led to a lot of the speculation that led to the crash of 29. But the crash of 29 was not really any worse than what happened in the early 20s. It just was. You had both Hoover and Roosevelt. Hoover was not a laissez-faire capitalist president at all. He actually started the New Deal. Even the Roosevelts admitted that. He started the National Recovery Act, and one of their main problems of many was that they thought that the solution was to keep prices and wages up. Well, that's if you happen to be working, that's fine, but for most people, not allowing wages to fall meant that they were unemployed, and goods and services, if people are making less money, that's not a bad thing if prices are also falling, but they were keeping prices up. Roosevelt ended the gold standard, which was a huge blow to any kind of discipline over the supply of money. So there was inflation in the 30s, and there was also what was known as regime uncertainty. So businesses that were eager to actually start back up were actually scared to do so because they didn't know what the new dealers were going to do. So this was a time, many have described it as three additional depressions or depressions within depressions. There were many booms in the middle, but they were followed by bad depressions. And even Roosevelt's top aides, Stimson, wrote that in 1939 the unemployment was just as bad as it was in 1933. So this was the first managed depression, and now we're in one too, and it's lasting way longer than it should.
Okay. Anybody
You
else?
think the depression, or as we call it now, the recession, is still going on?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
They've had quantitative easing, excuse me, quantitative easings, QE2, QE3, and they're really just flooding the market with money and low interest rates. So the numbers that you're hearing are kind of false. It would be like if you had run up a big credit card bill and were suffering, and somebody just extended your credit limit. That's kind of analogous to what's going on right now.
I agree that we are still in a recession. At least last time I checked, we were by my standards, but I agree for a different reason. If you think of a recession as negative growth, or whatever metric you want to use, I guess GDP. If you calculate inflation in the way that they used to in the 70s, where they took food prices and energy prices into account.
They don't use the things you buy.
Right. Then,
right.
if they still use that to calculate inflation, we would have a much higher inflation rate, and
Definitely.
that inflation rate would offset growth,
yes.
and therefore, yes, the way I look at it, yeah.
And if unemployment were counted the same way as
right, yes, unemployment. I mean, as soon as people fall off the rolls, they're no longer considered unemployed anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm actually going to have to scoot in a couple minutes. I don't want to leave too abruptly, but.
Well, all right. Well, there's one question I wanted to ask you, Jeff. One more question. Of all the major nations you've known in our history and even today, which one of them doesn't use central planning?
None. It's a relatively new idea. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. liberty is fairly recent in our times. The idea that an individual is sovereign, it's Declaration of Independence and this Enlightenment philosophers before that. But no, it's a new thing. It's
Well,
it's kind of like saying, well, are there any nations without cancer? No, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be.
Well, one form of non-central planning is confederacy, and I think there are at least 2 confederacies in the world right now. I don't remember what they were, though.
Yeah, but they still have localized. Like Canada is a confederation, but they have central governments within the provinces, and then they have a significant overarching confederacy.
Okay.
The U.S. under the Articles of Confederation was kind of that way, where the states were just sovereign, but they could be very heavily regulated. Before the Federal Reserve, actually, the monetary systems were mostly regulated by the states, so that's why there were still depressions and stuff prior. But even so, the movement of currency and stuff like that made them much more short-lived.
When we switched from the Confederacy to the Constitution, I think they went too far because they got very, very federalistic.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. It was the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was supposed to be just to sort of tighten up and make the Articles of Confederation a little bit more conducive.
And they just threw it out.
A free trade zone. No, it was actually a coup.
Yeah.
Many people have called it it was a coup d'état. It was.
Well, you guys, are you going to cover net neutrality in this one or another hangout?
Nah, I'm going to have to leave, and I'm not really an expert on that. I just speak of that in broad strokes. So maybe somebody, if you really want to talk about the nitty-gritty.
But thanks for your views on this one, Jeff. Very elucidating.
Okay. All right. Great talking to the rest of you. Some of you whom I haven't met before.
Oh, this is Pyong, and this is Albert.
Okay. I will circle you guys.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
All righty. Take it easy. I'm going to stay on here while I'm circling you because I think I'll lose you.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I want to offer to our audience is what a smart kid Albert is. How old are you, Albert?
17.
17 years old.
Yeah.
So are you self-taught, or did you have good teachers, or?
In terms of history, it'd be teachers, but when it comes to sciences, it's more on the self-taught.
So what sciences attract you, Albert?
I'm really into physics, particularly fundamental physics, cosmology, quantum physics, and relativity is the main thing.
The same stuff you are into, right, Pyong?
I am a mechanical engineer, which is the application of classical physics to solve problems that that have to do with power transmission. But,
wow.
Yeah, so look, pretty similar. I took one class in quantum mechanics, just as kind of an interest thing.
So, well, the way that I learned physics outside of class before I had physics, I have physics in class now, was there's this company called the Great Courses, and they have, so I got tons of courses from them. And
the teaching company, yes.
Yeah,
awesome.
The teaching company. In fact, I got like a giant stack of stuff because I don't just look at quantum physics. I also have chaos theory, complexity, evolution, a whole bunch of stuff. Do you want me to pull it out? Take a look.
You like, Albert. Go ahead.
All right, one
So,
second.
Pyong, I mean, at 17 years old, you were like Albert.
No, I was playing Donkey Kong and looking at.
I know. I was going to say, I was reading Captain America or something.
Trying to figure out how to get somebody to buy me some beer.
Right. Kiss a girl. Okay, well, tell me, when did the light switch go off for you, Eric? I mean, when did you say, hey, I got to be all about science. At what age?
Oh, dude, it was. You know what happened to me? My family is. We got a bunch of mechanical engineers in my family. My father, my brother. I've got a cousin who's a mechanical engineer. Kind of just, it's in the family, you know. But I originally wanted to be a writer, and so when I went to school, I studied the humanities, and I got into a lot of philosophy and that sort of thing. And it was I was rolling through the philosophy department, and I saw a bunch of dour faces, and they were all
Liquid jobs.
unemployment.
Right.
I said, I gotta get the fuck out of here. So, but yeah, no, I like science. Now I like it.
Look at all that. That is incredible, Albert.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
I keep all of them in the same box. So let's see what I got.
What is that? Hold on. There's you froze up there a little bit, but there's one neuro something. What did that say? Was it neurology maybe?
Well, I got one for nanotechnology. I never took
nanotechnology.
Yeah. So I got calculus, quantum mechanics, string theory, microbes. Wait.
Did you hear about you heard about string theories in the toilet now, right?
Yeah, I don't like string theory. Hold on a second.
Here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, that's how science works. I mean, that's what you know what? As a matter of fact, next time some religious person tells you, "Oh no, it's faith and it's your religion," you know, you can say, you know, no, we don't create edicts and we disprove things.
Hey,
Look
Mom.
at string theory; it's gone now. It's not actually gone.
These are the people I'm talking to, Mom. Here, I think you need to poke your head a little further
Says
in order for them to
Bruno
see
or
you.
something.
Yeah.
Bunto. Everybody calls you Bruno.
Hey, Mom, turn around. There. Come around.
Let's see Albert's mom.
All right. Yeah, you saw my dad at a different time.
You have a very smart son.
Yeah, but you're tipping it.
Yeah.
It's going that way. Catch it.
I'm getting it, all right? It's not going to fall over. It's got stuff to keep it from doing that.
This morning it was getting ready.
Okay.
So.
Hello.
Well, this is one person, and this is another person.
Hello, I abuse animals.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, wait.
I don't think she can't hear us, kid.
There we go.
Hello, how are you?
Who is this? Well.
My name is Eric, and I live on the internet.
And I'm Bunto. How are you? Albert's mom, everybody. We're just saying what a smart son he is. What a smart boy.
Yeah, I got all these. So I was actually reading them off right now. So hold on, let me continue that.
You're still reading them off. Okay.
Yeah, I got like a ton. It's not making for a nice stack right now. I should have kept them in the box and just wrote it down. All right, so let's see. We got calculus, quantum string theory. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of string theory until I saw this, and then later I stopped being a fan again. So.
Oh, really? You know, I mean, string theory is string theory. You know, it's a theory, and that's fine, but it relies on a supersymmetry model of understanding, I guess, what you would say is understanding of reality. And that model has now defined itself into obsolescence. It predicted a particular lifetime, or half-life, I guess, of a particle that they discovered at CERN, or the Large Hadron Collider, and they didn't predict it accurately. And what did predict it accurately was the standard model. So that's the reason, and it's incredibly complicated. But basically, if supersymmetry were to redefine itself so that it would accurately predict the half-life of that particular particle, it would no longer be able to explain anything else, is the way that I understand it. In a very general way, I'm speaking.
So string theory is disproved to some extent now?
Well, no, it's not disproved because...
But it's been knocked.
But it relies upon supersymmetry. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see. So they have to remodel what supersymmetry is then in order for string theory to be still possible as an accurate...
Right, and as supersymmetry is no longer appropriate for predicting things, or it didn't predict things properly, it is, I'm inclined to say that it's less desirable than the standard model. But the reason string theory hasn't been disproved is because there is almost no empirical evidence supporting string theory, like
Yeah.
multiple world interpretation and that sort of thing. Did you know how multiple world interpretation came about, by the way?
The many worlds interpretation?
Yeah,
No, I didn't know, actually.
Okay, well, this was a long time ago. I can't remember exactly when. It was in the 50s or the 60s. But an individual had come up with an equation that would predict the location of a photon within an incandescent bulb. Okay? Follow me so far?
Yeah.
And do you know what it means when I say a mathematical permutation of an equation? You know how you can take an equation and change it around a little bit, and it essentially.
Oh, yeah. Because when I think permutation, I actually think of the mathematical concept permutation.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. The permutation of a mathematical model.
A rearrangement. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Where they change it around a little bit. Well, in one permutation of the mathematical model, it led to the counterintuitive solution that the photon was in every conceivable place, in the physical place, at the same time. And so instead, my conclusion would be, okay, well, this model isn't robust and it needs to be refined a little bit, But that wasn't the conclusion of one of the individuals in a particular class, and I can't remember what the guy's name was. But he said, I guess you would say a postulate or a hypothesis maybe. He hypothesized, he said, well, listen, it would be possible for every photon to be present in every place within the incandescent bulb if there were an infinite number of dimensions or an infinite number of worlds spun off from ours through time, as a function of time. And that was the beginning of multiple world interpretation or multiple world theory.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
So it's not and I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it's not based on empirical data. It's not based on experiment. It's based on applied mathematics, which is extremely important. Because for a long time we didn't have the experimental apparatus to actually test a lot of the stuff in quantum mechanics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what we did was we developed a tremendous amount of applied mathematics, and now we're starting to validate a lot of those theories or disprove them. So that's what's going on now. That's why what's happening at the Large Hadron Collider is so important. Monumental.
I see. Okay. So, yeah, because anywhere else you just hear Higgs.
I'm sorry?
Albert keeps cutting on and off.
Higgs. Like, all you hear about the Large Hadron Collider in, like, the newspapers and such is about the Higgs boson, and now that that's been found, you don't hear much.
Right. They shut down for a while there. I don't know. I don't even know if they're operating up now. But they shut down for like a year for maintenance, I think. Or a long time. I can't say it was a year, but they shut down for a long time for maintenance. So.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Specifically Pyong. Is it better to be smart early as possible, or later, or does it not matter whenever you become smart?
Oh man, I don't know. I would say now that I'm far more educated than I was, but I don't think I've changed as an animal. I don't think that I'm smarter now than I was before. I'm just more educated.
Okay.
I have more certifications and that kind of crap.
Like they say, Albert Einstein was a complete idiot. Remember
What?
in school? Remember Albert Einstein?
No, it wasn't. He was an idiot. The problem was the school system was not built for him. He learned differently than other people, so he got bad.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of
A tall tale.
literary license there. I think that, or
Okay.
dramatic license perhaps, because I mean, even before he really got hard into a lot of his scientific stuff, and he did a lot of work with thermodynamics. Before he did that, he was a patent clerk, and you're not, if you're working as a
Yeah,
patent
nobody
clerk,
took
you're
him
not
seriously
allowed.
because he just lollygagged around. you know?
Yeah. So
Okay, so he finally applied himself and he came out with general relativity.
Yeah, because he was so bored in that patent office.
Does that make sense to you, Pyong? That he
I don't
just
know.
applied himself.
I mean, yeah, he created an intellectual construct. He came up with a thought experiment. You know, he had a pet theory that he was developing, and he was like, "Wow, this stuff's starting to make sense," and he was able to put it together. Yeah, it was great.
So, like, they say the American educational system is really terrible, mediocre, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Our problem is just that the kids aren't applying themselves.
No, here's the problem. Here's the
Okay,
problem.
tell me again.
We come up with. I read an article about this. We come up. Okay, the people who study education in America come up with brilliant ways to educate students, and they're used around the world. For example, in Japan. But the problem is, America is very bad at figuring out how to get this done. And the main problem, if I recall correctly, is you need to keep retraining the teachers every time you come up with something new that actually works. But nobody bothers to do this. They just tell.
Cut out again.
The teachers don't know what the heck they're talking about, so they go back to the same old methods that people have been using for generations.
Okay, well, what do you think, Pyong? Is that true? Our teachers are letting us down?
No, it's not the teacher's fault. It's that nobody's making them understand, like, the new stuff.
I don't know. That I think that's out of my purview. I'm not sure why. The only thing I can say is that I've looked at a documentary where they were talking about the education system in Finland, and Finland has just had a kick-ass educational system for years and years and years.
Okay.
And they did certain things differently. And one of the things that they did was they had very highly educated teachers who happen not to be in unions, by the way. So I think teachers' unions may have something substantial to do with it.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I don't know what the panacea would be.
Well, do you feel like your teachers were above average or mediocre?
It depends on where I was. I mean, when I was in high school, they were, just regular knuckleheads like everybody else. And then when I went to University of Missouri for a while, and they were exceptional there. And Purdue was exceptional, and my law school, they were very good.
I was thinking more public school. Let's look at the public school. The first.
I've never been to public school.
I thought you.
Really?
I went to Catholic school all the way through high school.
Ah.
That was a good thing, you think, or you would have had the same, outcome in public school?
Yeah, I don't think it mattered. I mean, and when I was in high school, I was not. Some classes I liked and I did well in. Other classes I didn't care about. I didn't really care what was going on in high school. So I just depended upon my. I always did good on the standardized tests, so I relied upon my standardized test scores to get into college.
Yeah. How about you, Albert? Albert, do you go to public school or private school?
I've been to public school all the way, but I'm in New York City, and my current is the Bronx High School of Science, which has the most Nobel Prize winners of any secondary school in the United States. So it's still a level above, but it is the public school system. So I have really great teachers, but it's the public school system. It really depends on your school, I think.
How many students in your class, Albert?
Oh, I don't know. I know how many are in my school. It's about.
Oh, rats. I wish that wouldn't happen.
You cut out there, buddy. I didn't hear the number. How many in your school?
For my class, but I know in my school it's 3,000 approximately.
Oh, okay. $3,000? Yeah,
Okay.
that's a
Yeah.
pretty big school.
Yeah.
Okay, Albert, do you enjoy any type of friend that you have, or do you just like to hang around smart kids?
I will basically hang around anybody that I find interesting, and that does not necessarily mean smart, but then again, everybody at my school is smart, so some people. So I'm not sure if I can tell the difference between very smart people. No, I'm not sure I can tell the difference between.
I was going to say, I know the sure remedy for that problem, Albert. Why don't you join the military? Pyong, you enjoy smart people, correct?
Well, no, not necessarily. I think intelligence is incredibly overrated. I think it's
Really?
I think it's an amalgam of many different characteristics, some of which are not necessarily, well, for example, like I've said this before, that it's perception, it's your ability to retain information, your memory, your ability to collate information, how well you apply that to reality and what you do with it, and then, of course, your ability to output it. So some people have some of those features or characteristics and not others, and I think everybody basically has something to contribute, and I'm happy to make connections with all kinds of people, not just smart people. Matter of fact, smart people are they're a little bit pretentious sometimes. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Have
so
you ever been to a Mensa meeting? Jesus Christ!
what happens? Just a quick nutshell for our audience.
Oh my God! They're just it's like the carnival of know-it-alls. Have you you know what I'm talking about with Mensa?
All right. Well, no, I've always heard of Mensa, but I've never been allowed to get near any of those people.
Yeah. Well, you ain't missing nothing, dude. It's like where nerds go to mate.
Okay,
No,
look,
man.
smart
Yeah.
people have big egos because they're smart, and they know it. Rightly
Well.
so, correct?
Yeah, but whatever. I mean, good Lord. I don't know, man. It just depends. I tell you what, smart people get dumb. They get,
Okay.
I know a ton of attorneys who are getting divorced, high on cocaine, drunks. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Couldn't care
They
less
have-
about your case, or
They
my
have
case even.
high intelligence, but not much wisdom.
Well, I don't know. Like I say, there's a lot of things that go into intelligence, so I'm not sure.
All right. Have you ever heard this term? You don't suffer fools. You never suffer fools.
Yes, I have heard that, and I think that's more about being self-indulgent and
All right.
not having the capacity to show reserve.
To relate to people that are not as quick as you are.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, that's just a, that's why would you? That's rude to me. Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't, I don't think that way. I'm happy to be buddies with whoever, unless they're insulting or rude or that kind of thing.
Or just obtuse enough where you just say this guy's I guess you could say that you're being obtuse or stupid and then move on.
I only say somebody's being obtuse if they're intentionally not understanding what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Did I ever say that you were being obtuse?
Oh, me? Oh,
Did
today?
I say that to you?
Today? Well, I was just thinking, we had that case where we were talking to that individual who was, denying something, plainly written in a sentence.
Oh, the Hitchens thing.
Right. Well, I was just thinking, okay, you can say, yeah, it is bad form to, crack down on something, just not suffer fools, but then there are those cases where you have somebody who's deliberately, being obtuse, monkeying around with the plain meaning of a sentence even.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So you do have those cases where you can put the hammer down and say, I'm not going to suffer this fool, and just call
Well,
them.
I don't use that phrase. I don't suffer. Now, I have said to people, "Oh, I see you're not burdened by genius," which is kind of
You're
similar.
not burdened by genius. All right.
But anyway, whatever. Why are we talking about intelligence?
Well, we started on Albert. Talking about Albert, I was just so impressed with the young man.
Yeah, Big Albert. Big Al.
And, they always knock the American public school system. You know,
Yeah.
you brought up the unions, and Albert brought up the quality of training for the teachers. And I believe somewhere we said it was just that the genius needs to apply himself to be the genius.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, everything, and that's really more to the point. Everything I've ever learned in any education system, I have taught myself, and I think that's, in a
Okay.
general way, I think that's true of everyone. They always teach themselves, so they have to engage and take responsibility for learning whatever. And I think that is key to the success of Finland as well. You know, like one of the classes that they had in Finland was knife making. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean,
Knife.
yeah, it's cultural. Like it's some cultural significance to them, but the people were engaged in it and they excelled. I think that that's fantastic. I think there are a lot of things that you could, a lot of educational lessons that could be learned in a knife making course. You know. Anyway.
Yeah, well, this has been a great hangout. I'm going to go ahead and cap this one. And
All right.
I invite all our audience to listen to our upcoming hangouts that we'll have. Have a good weekend. Take care.